Welcome to our 7th annual Writers Symposium by the Sea. I'm Dean Nelson on the journalism faculty at Point Loma Nazarene University. Our guest this morning is Barbara Bradley, a national correspondent for National Public Radio. She's covered every major story in the last few years that any of us can think of. The Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, Columbine High School shootings, World Trade Center and Pentagon attacks, all points in between. Currently, she is covering a number of different angles on terrorism in the United States. Barbara is a gifted writer who has crossed all sorts of genres in her nonfiction writing, starting out in the newspaper world with the Christian Science Monitor. She's been a foreign correspondent in Japan, other parts of Asia, and brings a rich context of understanding of world events, world affairs, but primarily how to tell a good story. Would you welcome Barbara Bradley?
Good morning. You know, I do a fair number of talks, but this is the age group that I like the most because you guys are just starting off and you're about to go change the world, and it's really an exciting time. I remember when I was just your age, I didn't really know I wanted to be a journalist. What I thought I wanted to be was a novelist or maybe a poet. That would have been scary for everyone if I were a poet. Let me give you the peak of my poet writing career. It was when I was a freshman in college. It went, this is a poem. There once was a girl named Heather who is small and light as a feather. She went walking astray on a blustering day, and now she's part of the weather. That's it. That's my poetry. So I wanted to do all sorts of creative things with my life, and my dad, being the practical type, decided, no, Barb, if you want to be a writer, what you need to do is be forced to write whether you like it or not. You need to go into a profession where if you feel sleepy on a particular day or the muse isn't with you, that you still have a deadline and you have to get some words on the paper and it has to go out there. So what I did is I was fortunate enough to get an internship at the Christian Science Monitor after my senior year of college. I actually wasn't interested in journalism until I got that internship. I like to write, but I wasn't particularly interested in world affairs or anything like that. So I went to the Monitor and I fell in love with journalism. It just became a passion. It's such a great career because you get to poke your nose into everyone's business. You get to ask them all sorts of questions. They don't really take offense unless you're particularly obnoxious about it. And you learn stuff every single day. I am learning things every day. It's really interesting. So it's a great profession. I fell in love with it. Ended up coming to the Monitor about a year later. I had to kind of take a detour into economic consulting because I'd already accepted a job. And I learned when I got to the Monitor that I had to write all sorts of stories on deadline that I didn't particularly want to write. I was a business and economics reporter and wasn't really interested in business and economics. But you know what it is? It created a muscle which I could exercise at any given time because, you know, I knew I had a deadline at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And there was nothing, whether I liked it or not, there's nothing I could do about it. Now that was the practical reason I went into journalism. I wanted to learn how to write, and I wanted to learn how to write well at command, so to speak. What I've realized since, and something you kind of get in retrospect, is I actually think journalism, for those who need to be journalists, is a calling. And you all would understand that word in a way that other groups of students wouldn't. But I have come to believe that journalism is about helping people engage in ideas. And you have to seduce them. You have to kind of give them the spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. People don't particularly want to know about the things that are on the front page of the New York Times or what they hear at the top of the hour at National Public Radio. You know, do we really want to hear an analysis of of exactly, well, I mean, right now it's kind of exciting with all that's going on in Afghanistan and tracking down terrorists and things like that. But a lot of times, are we all that interested in what the Federal Reserve Board chairman said about interest rates? You know, it's kind of feels pretty remote. I guess if you're looking for a mortgage, it's interesting. But other than that, it may not be. But journalism, what journalism does is it tells the public, guess what, you need to know about this. And we're going to make it interesting enough that you will engage. I think that's what a calling is when it comes to journalism. The other day I was on a panel at the National Press Club, and it was to a group of about 300 high school students. And someone asked us, there was a Newsweek reporter, kind of a woman who had been in the business for ages. She's a talking head on one of the talk shows. And then there was a CNN producer, and there was me. And we were asked a question, well, why do you do journalism? Kind of what's the core reason of why you do journalism? Well, the CNN producer said, well, I gotta tell you, the adrenaline of being first, the competition, is really what drives me. I just love to be first. And she should be at CNN, because they are first a lot. They're wrong a lot too, but other than that. Then the seasoned writer, talking for Newsweek, said, you know, journalism is about telling a story and nothing more. She said, you know, when I report a lot on, right now I'm doing a lot of civil liberties stuff, and I'm also covering the trials for Zacharias Moussaoui, the guy, you know, who wanted to fly but not land, that kind of thing, and John Walker Lind. And so I was in the trial, in the courtroom, when John Walker Lind walks in, and no one had seen him, of course, so it really counted what he looked like and how we described him. We are the public's eyes and ears. And so she said, you know, like yesterday, or Barb's story this morning, she just put us in the courtroom, and we got to see what he looked like and hear what he sounded like and blah, blah, blah. And that's all it's about. It's just about telling a story. Well, that's slightly higher calling than getting it first, in my opinion. But I actually don't think that's enough. I think the story is the anecdote to hook you in, to make the public care about an idea. And the idea is a larger principle. We need to learn about larger truths. So, for example, the impeachment was important. It was titillating because of Monica Lewinsky. But it was important because it was a clash of real ideas, robust ideas. For the Democrats, it's, you know, what in our system of government, what rises to the level that a president should be ousted and the whole system of government be paralyzed temporarily? What is the level? Are we a country of tolerance? Do we look into people's lives, or do we just look at their professional behavior? What is the standard here? For the Republicans, it was about, are we a nation of laws or of men? And no man is above the law, particularly the president. So what you had is a clash of real ideas. And that's what I wanted to bring out in my reporting about the impeachment. I covered the impeachment. And it was these clash of ideas. And what made the story so riveting from my point of view was not about, you know, the Monica Lewinsky's, you know, interesting behavior toward the President of the United States, or his interesting behavior about her, or dry cleaning, you know, the science of dry cleaning. That wasn't what made it. I mean, that was titillating, but the reason that story had legs, was because it was about larger ideas. And at best, journalism takes robust ideas and puts them in the ring and lets them compete. That's what journalism is all about. For me, that's what my calling is as a journalist. I want to take a detour for a second, and how many people have pieces of paper and pens here who actually came prepared to write down a note or two? Okay, I want you to write something down. Dean and I were talking about this yesterday, and that is, if you're a journalist, your early success is all about energy and chutzpah. When you're a young journalist, it's all about going out there, getting the story, banging on doors, being persistent, staying up long hours, working on your leads, you'll be successful if you have energy and chutzpah in your early years as a journalist. What I've noticed is I've gotten a little more seasoned and am now dealing generally with the journalists who are really at the top notch, like I do Washington Week in Review, which is a PBS program with some regularity. And what you deal with when you're on that kind of show, you're dealing with the top guy at the New York Times, and the defense reporter at the New York Times, and the person who's covering Enron for the Wall Street Journal. You're dealing with the really top people. The key to success in the long run as a journalist is character. It's what you are becoming every single day. And so the decisions that you make early on in your career are going to determine whether you are a fine journalist later on. And these are not decisions about whether to use, well, actually they are decisions about whether to use a certain quote or not. They're decisions about whether you consult your stomach and say, do I feel right about how I have written this story? Will I be able to look the person in the eye after I've written the story? Read him the story and look him in the eye, because I know that I have acted honorably. I've given the best sense of what this story is all about. I haven't taken a cheap shot. Am I going to get tough? And this is something you really have to worry about with journalism. Are you going to get tough or not? I remember when I first realized I was in love with journalism, I made myself a promise, and that was if I began to get tough, that I would leave the business. Because in the end, you don't spend your waning years with the Christian Science Monitor or National Public Radio. In the end, you spend your waning years with your friends and your family and your grandchildren. And if you are tough, you're not going to have those people around you. If you become an abrasive person, you're going to have very few people around you. Well, the good news is that decision not to become tough has actually been my strategic advantage in journalism, because people trust me. I do not betray people. I come into an interview and I talk with them and I want to know what drives them. This was a really horrendous thing that happened. I could either paint you as the bad guy, or I could recognize that you're a human being who makes decisions for very valid reasons. And so explain to me why you did what you did. I'm not tough. I come in and I want to know the story. And it is my strategic advantage. It means that I get stories that other people don't get. It also means that I don't do stories that other people would do. But that's my decision. Okay, so what I want you to realize, I want you to think about this. If you guys become journalists, 5 years down the line, when you're faced with a moral dilemma, I want you to think about what that woman said 5 years ago. You know, the one with she felt like she had to have 2 microphones on her. How in the early years it's about chutzpah and energy, in the later years it's about character. That's the marathon quality you want to think about. Now I want to talk a little bit about radio. Radio is, I've done all 3 media now. I've done print, TV, and radio. By far my favorite, well, I won't say that. I love radio. I would like to do more magazine writing. But in terms of just sheer fun and sheer content, I think there's nothing that compares to radio. I mean, as I said, magazine articles are great, books are great, you get a lot of content that way. But if you want to have fun on a day-to-day basis, radio's the way to go. You meet all the people. I'm the least quirky person there, and actually, if you knew me, I'm a little more quirky than I seem. I'm the least quirky person at NPR. They are all just performers, yet they're serious and they're smart. They're all very bright people. So what is fun about radio is you are around a set of people who are blast. Also, it's a warmer medium than print. Print is, you get a lot of content, you get more detail, but with radio, you engage the listener. There has to be an active participation on the listener's part. Unlike TV I mean, with print you have to engage the reader as well, but radio creates images in your mind. But what I want to do today is talk a little bit about storytelling. Here was the problem I was facing. There were all these exonerations, all these people getting out of jail based on DNA evidence. And this had been happening for a couple of years by the time, and I'd done several stories about DNA exonerations. But the dilemma I was facing is there were more and more of these things, but we hadn't really touched on the real issues of DNA and what it meant to the legal system. So I had this dilemma. How do you tell a story that is an underlying legal story that says something significant about how we try and convict people and put them in jail? How do I tell that story, but tell it in a way that's compelling, that's not theoretical? So, well, let me just get a sense from you guys. If DNA technology, which is like a fingerprint technology, you know, every time you sneeze, if I sneeze on this microphone, they will know that I'm here because my DNA is different from everyone else's unless I had an identical twin. Okay, what if DNA is coming out and they've developed this technology and all of a sudden people are being exonerated by it, being let out of jail because they realize they convicted the wrong guy? What's the underlying story here?
Judicial process.
Right, the judicial process has a problem. The way we convict people clearly is wrong, or at least it errs enough times to make us nervous. And so what I decided to do is look at the judicial process. And I decided to look at the story of two convictions. I thought, okay, how can I do this? How can I show that the judicial process hasn't worked? Well, one way to do it, actually, let me ask you, how would you do it? Taking two stories, how would you show whether the process is working or not? Let's get a student here, a journalism student.
Tell the story of someone that it happened to.
Right, okay, tell the story of someone it happened to in terms of being exonerated by DNA, right? And then, okay, so that at that point, that's just another exoneration story. How do you drive home the point that sometimes it can go wrong? I mean, you've done it with that. What I decided to do was pick another story with a very similar fact pattern, but there was no DNA evidence. So that really the only thing that, the major thing that differed between these two stories was DNA. And so what I did, and what I wanted to show is that in one case, DNA exonerated, and in the other case, the guy's still in prison. We don't know. Is he innocent or not? That's what journalism is about, is raising these questions. So what I did is I called up, and these are some tricks that you guys might think about in terms of telling stories, or if you go into journalism. I thought, okay, who's going to know about exonerations? And I figured, well, the guy, there are these people called, who run a project called the Innocence Project at Cardozo Law School. Barry Scheck, who was in the O.J. Simpson trial, one of the defense attorneys, what they do is they find cases where there's DNA involved and there's a real question of innocence or not. And they go and they basically investigate the case. And they've gotten something like, well, at this point they'd gotten 75 exonerations in serious cases. And that was it was a fairly new project. So I went to Barry Scheck and I said, okay, give me a half a dozen cases of guys who were exonerated by DNA evidence. No, of course it would be either murderers or rapists, because that's generally where people leave their biological evidence, when they're in blood or semen. And so I said, okay, give me a half a dozen cases where there's a guy was exonerated. So they did. What I did is I called all of the lawyers in those cases, and I said, do you know of a case where there was a similar fact pattern and there was no DNA evidence? It's the obvious thing to do. You go to the guy who might know different players. And I finally happened, let me step back for a second. There is no happening on a story. I mean, sometimes you can stumble on a story. Most of journalism is not about happening on a story. Most of journalism is about working really hard to uncover a story. It's not, generally a story is not sticking up there with a red flag because everyone else would get it too. The best stories are the ones where you have to dig and find them. So I didn't happen upon this story. I found a story after a lot of phone calls of a couple of men who had been in Ada, Oklahoma, who had been convicted of raping and murdering a girl. A couple of years later, or it might have been a couple of years earlier, in the same time area, Ada, Oklahoma, I mean, that's not a big city. A couple of years before or after, there was another rape and murder of a girl. And in the first case, there was DNA evidence that exonerated. And in the second case, there wasn't. Now, what was interesting about this was the parallels. The same investigator, the same jailhouse snitch, the same district attorney prosecuting, the same kind of forensic evidence, which was clearly flawed. Same issues. And yet one, there was an exoneration, and in the other, there wasn't. So that is what I decided to do. I decided to tell the story of the flaws in the legal system through the eyes of these people who were caught in the system. I don't know if the second group of men, 2 men, are innocent or not, but at least we raised a question. Now, what I had to do, and I'll walk you through this a little bit, because if you all become journalists, then you'll have to do this. I set up my interviews, decided to go down to Ada, Oklahoma. I researched the story beforehand. Okay, I did a lot of phone interviews beforehand, probably for several days. The interviews that I did in 2 days, in 5 different cities, in 3 different states. I I mean, you run out, you do a flat-out race while you're out there on the road. So I set up the interviews. I went, and I set up enough time to really just talk to these people. I went out there, and what I was looking for was the clash of robust ideas again. Now, in a story like this, it would be very easy to set up the prosecutor as a bad guy, or the investigators as bad guys, and then say, aren't they bad? DNA good, prosecutors bad, right? Criminals good, or suspects good, prosecutors bad. I mean, that's a really simplistic way to do it, and you see a lot of that in journalism. That's not what I'm going to do. There are robust ideas. There is a reason that this prosecutor prosecuted these guys, even though they weren't guilty. There was enough evidence at the time for them to do that. There was some really compelling tape on the other side of the defendants. But the important thing was to engage you so that I didn't set up just a straw man, just someone I could knock down. That's not interesting. What I wanted to do is engage you so that you were caught up in the drama and you saw that, you know what, this is not about a bad person. This is more fundamental. It's about a system that's flawed. Okay, I also want to talk about interviewing style a little bit. I go out there. I never do confrontational interviews. Other people can. I don't do them well. And I have to tell you that I think my way works better, at least for a woman. And the reason is this: you get tape, you get confession, you get interviews that you wouldn't get if you were confronting someone. I mean, I went down there and I was nervous doing this interview. I went down there and I talked to him, and he's this big old, kind of good old guy from Ada, Oklahoma, this DA. We're sitting in his office, and I could have gone in there and said, you messed up. You prosecuted these guys and they were in jail for 13 years and one of them was on death row. How do you feel about that? And he would have said, well, look, we worked with the evidence at the time, all right? Okay? I'm doing the best job I can. Get out of here. Okay? What I did, though, is I went in and I said, gosh, can you walk me through this whole story? Can you just talk to me about what happened with these guys? Okay, now, what was the evidence against them? And he talked about that. And we just talked through the uncertainties about it, but why they made this decision and not that decision, and all of this. And finally, I got to the point I said, gosh, well, what did you think when you found out that the DNA exonerated these guys, that they weren't guilty? By this point, he was comfortable with me, and he said, I'll tell you. I called down to the lab and I said, do we have that biological evidence still around? And they said yes, and I said, well, great, let's go out and test it, because I thought that would be the nail on the coffin. And when that evidence came back and those boys weren't guilty, why, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I was shocked. You don't get that tape in a confrontational interview. You get that when you want to understand their story. I want you all to think about what your passion is. It could be, it could be helping people, and if you're good at science and you need to become a doctor, but maybe you could be a medical reporter, or you could write books about that. Or it could be that you want to help the poor, and you could become a public defender, for example, or you could write the kind of stories that I write for a newspaper or for radio or for television. So this week, try to think about what really drives you. What is it in you where you go, wow, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, when I see an alert on the wires, the wires send up an alert, if it says executive privilege, now what I know is that's going to be a complicated legal story, and I get all excited about it. Executive privilege? But to me, that's like a real turn on. Okay, I don't know what it is for you all. I don't know, but each person needs to examine what you really love, because you will be very good at doing what you love. So everyone think about that and realize that you are right now at the cusp, at the very beginning of making a real difference in the world. And you can do it just as this kind of story makes a difference. Makes a difference. I want you to think about what area of the world you would really like to impact. And think about how you can get there. Thank you.